You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly ecom strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Goad and Paul Rogers. Get insights into ecom strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This podcast is sponsored by WorldPay. So Paul and I today are diving into a topic that we think is really interesting and really important. And this is about how the current trends around e-commerce, customer and technology are things like agentic commerce, for example, and AI product discovery are reshaping ecom strategy, team structures, and also the demand for skills within teams and the balance between those teams. Because the reality is that we all have to, as businesses, react to market changes, customer changes, and evolution of technology. So this is important because it's about understanding what you need to keep an eye on in the future and also thinking about your team and how it needs to evolve potentially differently to existing resource plans. So this is going to be about our observation and insights, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, where we're seeing other companies evolve into and decisions they're making. So if I pull out 4 key highlights, and we dropped a newsletter from Inside Commerce on LinkedIn yesterday about this. And this is going to be our exploring this in great detail. So the top level highlights about product data is a growth channel. And this links into AI discovery and agentic commerce. AI native products and engineering leadership is going to become more and more important within businesses, not just in your external partners. The kind of enhancements in AI tooling and the capabilities of low and no code is going to increase demands on the expectation of things like continuous experimentation, for example. And instead of being data driven, it's being data led and data smart. So the tooling is there now, and it's about properly integrating marketing data tech for smarter decision making, but also probably ripping up our older playbooks about what KPIs and success criteria people should be using. And we had Ecom ID on the pod recently, and they were talking about retained order value, not average order value. And this is a great example of smarter to measurement, better tools, more accurate measurement equals better KPIs and measures. So that's my rambling setup, Paul. Is that a good enough? Do you reckon that's a good enough position for what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll probably end up covering quite a lot. Like just when we, obviously a second ago, when we started framing the episode, I feel like we went off on a few tangents. So yeah, I'm sure we'll cover loads of different areas around all this stuff.
Well, tangents are good. We know that's what we like doing. But let's start with what's changing. This is not just conceptual. This is actual. It's based on what is happening, the ecom teams we work with and the technology we're seeing people invest in and how we're also using technology ourselves as service providers to a range of brands. So it's a step change from humans basically going onto a standard search engine, clicking on ads somewhere and browsing websites and buying from that website without any other tools enhancing that. So they are using the website as the purchase funnel too. Multi-agent systems influence discovery, comparison, and then to a lesser extent checkout. And there's a lot of evangelism around agentic commerce, as in agents like the LLMs, chat GPTs are going to take away all the commerce and people are going to buy directly from them. And it's just not happening at volume. And you've seen OpenAI roll back on their checkout ambitions. But from a product discovery point of view, the traffic is there growing. So more and more, there are additional systems that are consuming information from your site, from other systems that helps them to decide what's relevant, what's not, what information to show and when, to influence how people find which sites they come to, what even how far down the decision-making process they are and what their intent to purchase is when they get there. And some elements of commerce might happen to a great extent out of the site, but it's more about those agents and how they influence what people do. So that's the key thing. How do you think this is impacting like ecom strategy, Paul?
So right now, I don't think so. In terms of like optimized and for visibility within the LLMs, I feel like all the conversations I've had around this is there's like different levels within a business. Everyone's kind of panicking and essentially seeing a world where a lot of demand is coming from the LLMs, and they're kind of thinking, how do we get ahead of it? I think, in my opinion, there's not that much that can be done right now to actually get ahead of it. So I think our average client has probably done some level of audit and paid someone to do some level of presentation on like what's happening right now in like relative to their brand, and like what they can be doing to just be better informed as they head. But I think the difficulty at the minute is, the biggest challenge is that you can't measure anything properly. And I think, these tools, I was actually at dinner yesterday, and someone from a really big brand was saying that they're paying a fortune for Profound, and I think Profound's great, and it's obviously first to market, and it can obviously give you good insights and good suggestions. But I just think it's really difficult. I mean, all of the best practices, great, like try and build those into your strategy and like, optimize your PDPs, etc., if you think it's the right thing to do as a brand. But I think the difficulty at the minute is, like, you can't measure what's happening in Google. Like, there's no way of differentiating kind of traffic coming from AI mode or kind of any of the kind of AI interfaces. And then with ChatGPT, you can only measure referral traffic, which is going to be a minute percentage of the demand being created there. So, like, I don't know if you're the same. I think the majority of people that I speak to, if I find something by ChatGPT, I immediately go to Google and then search for the brand or the product. And I think that'll get easier to measure over time. And I think experiences will get better. But I think my view on it is, I think OpenAI caused the speed and like shifts, and like they caused Google to essentially move way faster than I think they would have liked to with how they're approaching like the agentic experience and agentic commerce. But now I think they will slow down. And I think because Claude are essentially, I think that, so many companies, perform like really clawing back market share from OpenAI. I feel like they won't focus on this as much. And I think that will help to slow things down a little bit. And then, I think that will like give us all a bit more time. But I think where it'll go to is, I think from a demand perspective, it'll get easier to track. All these tools will give you better reporting, and then you can like properly invest in it as you would with SEO and actually measure impacts. I think that's the difficulty at the minute. So many people I know are investing money in this, but you can't actually see any level of impact because all the tools are doing is like querying ChatGPT millions of times and seeing how often you're indexed, and but there's so many variables. And so I think the second that you can see the impact, it will help. And then I think the next thing will be just automate some level of automation around the transaction. But I still see that as like the bottom 10% of commerce.
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay e-commerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay e-commerce.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, when I put that post out yesterday, so Joel Smith, who's a well-respected and highly experienced Ecom digital technology leader, his comment was about just not buying into the hype around the commerce element of how much of this behavior is then actually transactional in these agents that are external to your Ecom infrastructure.
Yeah.
I'm fully on board with that because there isn't the evidence there to suggest that this is happening en masse. I can see some areas where true agentic commerce external to websites could grow. Things around ticketing, I could see that definitely working well because it's actually solving a problem, which is like shit user experience by automating and speeding up and taking away pain. But for so much discovery, just when you get into complexity of ecom, where it's right, okay, well, I've got an item I want to collect it from the store, or I've got to go through a more complex checkout logic because I'm got using a local collection network, and I've got to be able to find a local collection place that's near to my postcode, and And you got all these complexities in a checkout with order management rules. Where Jesus Christ, how would you replicate that with an agentic commerce and without creating potential fraud exposure? So that I'm in tune with, and I don't think that's going to dramatically change ecom strategy at all in the short term. Where I think it's really interesting is a bit you talked about at the start, is the product discovery, and we have moved from it just being about SEO, and I don't believe that answer engine optimization is any different to SEO. It's a part of, but it's a growing part.
Yeah.
The demands of this, where I'm seeing the shift is, if I go back several years, when semantic search first became like the terminology in Google about more structured data, more intelligent capability, passing micro snippets of content, not just whole pages, and bringing structured data into the results. Then people got obsessed with, right, well, let's add loads of FAQs. But I don't know whether you've seen it. I saw it slowly morph into basically, we've added FAQ blocks in our pages, job done. But it was no more than, let's look at what questions are being asked. Let's add FAQ content. Where I'm seeing it shift a bit is people thinking more about the intent of what people are doing on pages and why, what type of information they might want. An FAQ is part of it, fundamentally, but it's other data to answer other shopper questions or potential barriers to purchase, where people are thinking about what else they should build into their pages, how those pages need to be structured, and how that content needs to be atomized to make it indexable for SEO, but also then for these LLMs to be able to pick up.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, my view on this, because I completely agree with everything you just said, and I was having quite a long conversation about this last night. I think right now, I completely agree with everything you just said. And I think you look at Google like 7, maybe like even 10 years ago, to be fair, like, everything was around how you structure data, and it was very, like not basic interpretation of that data, but there wasn't that kind of like additional, like they weren't as strong with like the natural language processing and everything else versus today. Like, in my opinion, if you look at like the correlation of the brand's ranking and the level of on-page optimization they do, a lot of the time those brands aren't optimizing for SEO at all, and they're still ranking really well because of all the brand signals and everything else. So I think the two variables here, I think, because everyone's optimizing, and as they should be, I guess, to what's working or what they know about the algorithm right now. I think all of the LLMs will get so much more sophisticated in how they approach rankings. Plus, they're going to have like more data than ever before on me as a user, because of all the different queries I'm putting through that LLM. And especially if we start shopping and they've got context around where I live and everything else. I just feel like I think in a year's time, 18 months time, it'll be a lot less around the things that, because right now everyone's trying to build a Reddit strategy and get a Wikipedia page and everything else. And I just think it'll move really quickly.
Which is SEO. I mean, that's always been SEO. There's zero difference, right? This is what I think there is a conflation in the market of, and there's self-interest in every new technology trend where people go, we can make something out. We can position this as something completely different. Emperor's new clothes. And AEO is just basically polishing something that's already existed, but it's been executed in different ways now, because you haven't just got search engines where people are asking slightly more smart questions, like mobile device and the advent of like speech to phone searching when you're on the move help to expand query types. Yeah, that's been there for years. This is just now you're right, it's the volume and it's the unstructured nature, I think, actually, because when you're talking to somebody, you are still quite structured because it's your natural way of talking. But when you're in a chat, in a ChatGPT or whatever interface, and you're going through multiple prompts and commands and iteratives, you get quite lazy sometimes in, can you just do this? What about? And it's not a structured language. So I think that's probably the big shift in terms of understanding how people interact.
I think, so this is a tangent, but it is relevant to one of the topics that we were going to talk about anyway. And we were talking about it a bit earlier. So I was saying to James that I've been working a bit with Swap on their new Agentic product, which is really interesting. There's obviously a few players in the market at the minute, and a lot of people are trying to kind of build that experience, like of a really strong, kind of dialogue, conversational commerce experience where essentially you're gradually providing more context, and then it's providing super relevant results, and you can do virtual try on, and you can like refine really easily, etc. But the thing that I've found really interesting, actually, to the point of, you know, these LLMs know loads about us. So one of the big things that essentially what big part of Swap's strategy, and one of the big benefits to the brand around this experience is, and you can see it happening, like kind of when someone's using it. So you're kind of just constantly giving information, and essentially like as I'm going through and I'm saying, no, I prefer this, I'm going to wear it here. And then it's saying, oh, what size are you, just so I can refine? And then it's stored your size. And then it's like, how quickly do you need it to come? Like blah, blah, blah. And it's just constantly asking questions. And then essentially against that user, like the level of data that they're collecting that is essentially stored against that user. And if they've provided an email, like it's like the ultimate like data collection journey for a brand, then that can all be pushed into your CRM or CDP. And if there's certain data points that are more valuable, you can just ask the agent to proactively ask for that, and you're just much more likely to give it. And I think I found it quite interesting, like seeing as they've developed the product, because I think I was super skeptical at the start, like really skeptical. And then I think I gradually started to see how in the right use case, it's a much better experience. Then I started to see how you're building up all that knowledge. And I think it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
I think this is a point I wanted to tease out today, is that there's a lot of rightful skepticism about the growth of agentic commerce, the commerce element to it. So who's going to go in and actually like start searching in a chat GPT and end up making a purchase directly within there, and hand their details over and be comfortable that the checkout is, everything's fine. And that companies can surface all of the logic via an API to make those journeys work across all of the product, versus owned agentic commerce. So that's my shit terminology I'm introducing, owned agentic commerce, which is within your ecosystem, your website, app, whatever you offering people, you are using agents to automate tasks, to increase self-service. And a great example would be customer service chatbots. Loads of businesses already use these agents. They enable the agents to solve, hundreds, if not thousands, of daily queries related to things like order status, tracking, you name it. I've seen brands who've reported a 80% plus reduction in customer tickets as a result of introducing smart agents. And it is case by case, depending on the nature of the inquiry and how complex the inquiries are. But then I think the big change is going to be using those more effectively through site journeys, not just as I've got to click on it for you to help me, is proactive prompting to go, hey, can we help you with this? But it's also the intelligence of the handover point. When does an agent have to hand over to a real person? What is that process? How smooth and efficient is it? What's the wait time for somebody? Does that then lose them in whatever journey they're in because it's jarring? And that to me is an area where e-com teams have got to spend more time thinking.
Yeah, I think it's going to be so interesting. So where this ends up, because I think right now, so there's quite a few brands that have introduced an agentic experience where, as you say, you can go and kind of navigate the catalog, but you could also ask about service, stores, whatever else. And I think there's already brands that are starting to introduce the option where essentially the real estate that was live chat is moving into like a broader alternative way to browse. So On have just introduced, it's not very good and it's not very broad, but I can see where they're probably looking to take it. And essentially it's like a hybrid live chat and product discovery piece. Where I think it'll go, because essentially, and you mentioned intent earlier, which I think is really key, because if I've just discovered a brand on Instagram and, I've seen a bit of creative and it's made me think this brand's great, the most performant journey is going to be showing that user a bit about the brand and the catalog. And in a lot of cases, people will want to see a PLP, or like they'll want to browse the catalog visually to see what they like. However, there are then other types of users that, need a different way of navigating. And I think they would prefer to have a conversation, essentially like, look, I'm going out tonight. Can you just show me 4 dresses? And I want to do virtual try on, and then you can give me feedback and tell me some stuff. And then that's the better experience. But I think where it'll get to is exactly what you just said I think it'll start with a fight for the chat bot piece. And I think someone is going to need to create a solution where different companies can feed into that, where you could integrate Gorgeous, you could pull in product results, you could pull in alternative information, etc. And then I think where it will get to, and I don't know which vendor's going to drive this, and in theory it could be Swap, it could be Shopify, it could be someone else, is like, I think we'll get to a co-pilot experience. And I think essentially you'll land on the site, and then you'll have the option of, you'll have both options. And then I think as you're browsing the site, if you're on a PDP at any point, you would like open your Copilot interface, and then you might ask questions about that PDP, but you might equally be like, look, show me 20 more products like this. And then if you wanted to, you could essentially continue your journey in the kind of chat experience. But yeah, I think it'll quite quickly get to that point. That's where I kind of see it heading.
Yeah, it's interesting to say. I sat there thinking the other day, and part of me, the big challenge I'm going to put to that point is I don't disagree with it, but I think in the industry we can foresee something because of our knowledge of the technology that doesn't necessarily have the demand from a customer point of view. And I think conflating the two is always a risk when you're working in tech day in day out, because I can see that work for some people. I was working in Shopify and Sidekick, and on a complex store build, and I've constantly got Sidekick open next to me.
Yeah.
And in the same way with ChatGPT, with the business license version, where my chats are stored, and I can go back at any point and go, oh, I was doing that piece. Oh, I was trying to sort out those Python scripts on there. Right, what was that command? I've forgotten what that prompt was. I've got that history. The problem with chatbots at the moment on a site is I'm in a query with a customer. I've got one at the moment with a bedding mattress company, because the mattress keeps coming and it's shit. And I'm on the chat, but there's no history. There's no recognition that I've already had this chat, and that was a week ago, and you've sent me another one. So I'm redoing everything. And as a customer, it's really bloody annoying. If you approach that pilot chat, that Sidekick thing, is, well, actually, I can have a history and I can see, and therefore, even if it's just, I can refer people out, or I can copy and paste, but I can track my history. And it might be, oh, so you recommended a product the other day, and I can say, oh, you on Thursday you recommended this really cool product. Where is it? I think that is a future option. I don't know how many customers demand that. That will be my question.
And to be honest, I think it's really open, isn't it? So I think we'll get to that co-pilot way of browsing, but what I don't know is who's gonna play a key part and how it's gonna work. 'Cause the other side of this, realistically, the browser, because I've started using so I use Claude a lot, and I've really doubled down on trying to give Claude enough context and enough integration into all the tools that I use to automate proportions of what I do. And then I use the Chrome extension. And essentially, if I'm actually if I'm on a web page and I want to extract information, or I want to go and find similar things, I use the extension. And actually I don't think it'll be a browser extension, but it does the browser. If I'm Google, I feel or if I'm Apple with Safari, I feel I would be seriously thinking about, how do I play a major part in this? How do I collect all the data? Yeah, how do I potentially at some point make some money through payments or something? And I think, Apple are in I think everyone's talking about Google and OpenAI, which I think makes sense, because that's the short-term major change area. I think Apple are in a really interesting macro position, with Safari being the dominant browser, and Siri having so much potential to play a major part as a sidekick, or as in the agentic space. And I think that is something that people aren't really thinking about, because it's not happening it's not live, but I think you just need to look at who they're hiring around commerce and in the AI space. Like they're definitely a play. And then I think the other side to this would be like Meta. So for our brand, Meta is by far the biggest discovery channel. And like that's how people, first come across the brand in a lot of cases for a high proportion of users. And it's like, what role do they play in this? And they're certainly not just going to watch people, replace the website and try and take, try and steal demand or market share from the awareness and discovery side. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, which players are in what position in like 2 years.
Link, the point I want to move on to before we get down that rabbit hole, because it is interesting. It is interesting to watch what big players are doing, but is the impact that the evolution of tech and how customers are using the technology is having on team structure and skill needs. So if I talk about what I'm seeing, and then you can riff on, and we're probably seeing similar but slightly different things. So there's what I see for e-com recruitment is a massive competition for specialized skills to get senior people and people who have experience across, I guess, the areas that are converging now. So the way that tech is enabling you to improve like omni-channel customer experience, the way that data connectivity is increasing the ability to drive intelligence and automation, and AI is a constant theme in all of that. And I'm seeing more businesses where the boards are aware of and talking about what their overall AI strategy is, what role it plays, what they need and how people need to use technology and what the benefits will be. And looking at internally what that means, not just to what someone does from an execution point of view on ecom, like, we've got a search and match tool with AI testing, A/B testing, or we've got this AI tool to do X, but it's the internal day-to-day team management, improving efficiency, stripping out costs. And there are two skills that I think senior ecom hires now need to demonstrate, not just have an awareness of, but demonstrate that they know what to do with it. And there's AI product management. So understanding what agentic pathways are. So how shoppers are using AI interfaces, what impact that has, what they need to do on their site, how they need to improve structures around product data, content to drive visibility, to future-proof for it. And then it's also the internal bit, like knowing how, whether they're using a Claude, a Chat GPT, whatever the AI tools are, what that role is in their team, how their team should be using it, what license versions they need to support it, what the expectations are, and how that can improve speed of execution, cut out inefficiency, help them focus on value add. And then linked to that is conversation design. So this is understanding, and the two parts again is on a site where you have agentic tools, what is that conversational interface? What is that user experience and flow? What are the prompts and how do customers react and respond to them? And then within the business, if you're expecting somebody to use an AI tool for like product data cleansing and improvement or content generation, what's their fluency and understanding in terms of like prompt writing and engineering? And do we know that they're going to get the best out of the tool and not compromise output? So this to me is really tangibly happening right now.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting, and I think it's super inconsistent across our client set. And I think so. Every year before Pulse, I do a little survey, and this year is about 70 ecom directors, and there's a couple of questions around AI. And I would say what's quite interesting is you've essentially got maybe 15% of people doing absolutely shitloads, and I'll come on to like what they're doing and how they're benefiting. Got that 15% of people doing literally nothing, and they're not thinking about it at all. And then you've got the middle, who are essentially buying based on AI capabilities and using for like the basic use cases around kind of customer experience and content generation. But I think it's really interesting because like the way that, and I think I look at our client set and like I'd say, Represent are at one end of the scale where they've now built, but in their internal team, they have 2 public Shopify apps that have been built via, AI and no code that are now on the Shopify App Store. They were super early to translations. They've done a lot of stuff around like visual content, everything else, and they're constantly like experimenting. And they've kind of moved to like data structures and reporting tools that allow them to interface via prompting and like generate by prompting. And I think for us as a business, that's been like the one that we've invested the most time in. But I think when I look at some of the other ones that are not particularly AI literate, essentially they're outsourcing. So I still think they're doing some of the same stuff, but they're outsourcing. So they might have, I think, consultants kind of making suggestions around how they use AI, how they approach the visibility on their LLMs. And then I think they're then relying on vendors like Shopify and Klaviyo to drive some of the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I love this topic and I'm actually super interested in it. But I feel like it's just so varied. And I don't know if you follow the CTO of Huel on LinkedIn, a guy called Ollie. But like, you only need to look at, so like I think he is essentially like just someone that is super into like no code, very kind of, he's clearly stayed very hands-on, and he's investing a lot of time into looking at the stack across the business in Huel, and he's quite open about what he's kind of built in the business. And I've seen the head of engineering talk about it. I've seen someone in a data role talk about it, and it's like, it's incredible what they're doing. But I think the interesting thing is, so far, like you look at that business and some of our clients that have really built amazing stuff with AI, so far they're just more effective, and they're probably net saving money, or they're definitely net saving money on outsourcing, and they're probably approaching things that they wouldn't have done before. But I think the whole narrative around this is like, the Ecom team will be a team of one in like 3 years. And so far, I think my view on it is that people are just more effective at the minute. I don't think there's like, I guess like teams probably will get leaner and more efficient. But I think one thing that I would say at the minute is like, after observing this for months, February was like the worst month we've seen in like 2 years from a trade perspective. And I feel like half the people that were like absolutely flying on AI and like investing all their time in that are now like desperately going back to the basics and like, yeah, trying to, have the conversations with the people in the business to figure out how to like trade better and like recover revenue and figure out profitability. And obviously like, I mean, again, I'm kind of rambling, but I think it's just really hard to have an opinion on like what is right now, because the brands of ours that are doing the best from a growth perspective are not actually doing that much of AI. They're just outsourcing opinions and buying technology. I think it's such an interesting discussion, but I think there's a massive advantage for upskilling internally and externally and building capability, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. And I don't think right now you're falling that behind if you're not putting all your time into it.
I don't think you should put all your time into it, but I fundamentally, I believe anything that can be a critical competitive advantage should have ownership in-house, even if you outsource elements of it externally. It's always been the same, throughout the history of Ecom, SEO. If you don't have somebody in-house who understands anything to do with SEO and you've outsourced to an agency, you have no idea how to hold the agency to task, how to measure it, whether the strategy is right and supporting your business goals. With the advent of AI tech and its impact on customer journey, habit, and also internal efficiency, to have no ownership of that in-house to me is a big risk. It's a big risk, and I would never advise. But equally, I don't buy into this dystopian future of, you get rid of everyone. There's a couple of people on LinkedIn peddling this, and it depresses the shit out of me every week. Is I can show you how to get rid of your entire team and be. It's like, oh my God, mate, go into the matrix and never speak to another human being.
Yeah,
we need people. For me, this is about, why would you want your team constantly going, oh, I can't get that done because I've got to do this. There's a problem with this spreadsheet or this data is wrong. If you can put in smart tech that can automate and clean and sort things out and take away the crap tasks that people hate and spend 50% of their time doing, you've now got teams focused on value add. You can ship the roadmap items that you can't ship. You can do those value add things on the site that you couldn't previously execute, those additional categories that you wanted to, all that stuff. So you take away the barriers to executing things that the business knows takes it forward. And that to me is where strategic ownership has to happen in-house.
I completely agree. And I think realistically, right now is the time where every single business probably needs a view on which technology they're going to back, how they're going to structure data most effectively to make it work, how they're going to share Claude skills or whatever, and how they're going to like govern it. But I feel like that's the point we're at. I think the bit that I find really difficult, because I think that the thing that's hard is like, and again, like, I mean, there's just so much benefit and like you say, competitive advantage. I mean, the CRO space is one that I think is really interesting, like watching how quickly you're able to build sophisticated tests without the need of a developer. And I think like seeing all that stuff is just mad. But I think what's really interesting is that I look at how big teams are, because some of our clients, they'll have people that are technical and they'll have time, versus some of our clients just won't. And I think like it's where like there's just, I just think that's a massive variable in how much time people should invest in AI.
Yeah.
It's like the holy grail is you invest money into bringing people into your team to get the most out of AI. But it's like some businesses have that money and the time to think about it, and some don't. And yeah, I think overall, I think we're both saying like everyone should be investing in this and building capability. But it's like, it's just difficult to say when a brand should go deep and not go deep versus buy and outsource. And
yeah, that I get. But for me, it's a mindset shift. And I know I've had to go through this myself, because my tendency, if I've got something where, this is complex, I've got to get this done, and I start playing around with a tool and it can't do it straight away, my tendency to go, shit, I know I can do this myself. I can do that in Google Sheets. But I've had to force myself on a current project around product data to go, no, don't. And I spent time. So I spent about half a day in ChatGPT and managed to fix and resolve the issues I had and got it to about 90% of where I needed. And actually, that would have probably taken me about 2 days worth of work if I'd done it myself by creating formulas, lookups, manipulating data, etc. And so I've saved myself a day and a half, but I had to stop and go, right, no, trust in the tech and use it. And even if you don't, the learning of what the boundaries of what you can and cannot do will help you to make smarter decisions as you go forward. So, I mean, I personally, if I was the owner of an ecom business, or I was the director of recruiting and I wanted a senior ecom manager, if they didn't have skills and knowledge and understanding of the AI elements of tech and how it can be used internally, but also within the ecom tech stack that they would be managing or demanded investment in, that wouldn't be enough for me to tick the box and go, right, I think you're a strong enough candidate.
I think one of the things that, and I guess we probably had loads of time now, but I'll just say this lastly. So I think what I found really interesting, because I completely agree with what you just said, and this is a slightly different topic, but so, my wife so she left Clayview 4 or 5 months ago, and she's been really careful looking for a new role, but essentially she wanted an implementation or like kind of product strategy role in an ecom SaaS business. She's seen about 8 jobs she liked, and all of them have been super competitive. And quite early on, I think she realized, and this applies to us, I guess, as well, and lots of companies, that the only thing that can give you a competitive advantage now is being able to demonstrate your experience and knowledge of AI. So Ina's basically spent the last however long just learning Claude, and like she's done various different courses, which I think is also amazing what's available to like learn all this stuff. And I think now, because also like AI and the economy and Shopify and everything else has really impacted the competitiveness for roles. So like every role we put out, we have hundreds of applicants. Like unemployment is not great and it's going to get worse. And actually now I think it is critical to have working knowledge as a candidate of AI, unless it's a very specific role and you have a very specific set of skills or background that makes you the perfect candidate. I'm just completely agreeing that I think, anyone looking at moving into a role that isn't director level now should be thinking, how can I demonstrate that I am extremely capable from an AI perspective, and I can input into the best way for the business or my role to use AI to be more effective.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm not saying that AI should take over. I definitely am not advocating AI should replace people, unless you have. Yeah, I'll tell you what it can replace, and I know for a fact it can, is where some people in projects go, oh, we need a temp for a couple of weeks to sort this data out in a spreadsheet. But actually there are times I've been in projects, people go, oh, I just need, we'll pay the agency a bit extra and they can sort this copy. It's like, well, actually you don't need to anymore for a lot of these tasks. So if it is, we need to resort all the data and we need to formulate and normalize, and that's got to be in sentence case. We need that in lower. There are no hyphens, or we got all these weird characters. Is, well, actually, you need someone to spend a couple of hours writing really precise prompts and enumerated commands into an AI model that will do it all for you, and then you just need to spot check and validate it. So I think there are tasks that can be removed, not people.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate the prospect of remove people. It's let people have better, more enjoyable jobs and be smarter and do more value add. But what it will change, in my opinion, is the type of person that people recruit in the future.
Yeah.
The other thing, so I'm interested in whether you see this now, and I think maybe the type of project I work on is probably more biased towards this, is I think linked to this and linked to the point of this isn't about getting rid of people, but it's the skill set is, I foresee a more, and I've seen it in some businesses recruiting Ecom product managers to sit underneath a head of Ecom. The head of Ecom is the more traditional, strategic, trading, P&L, numbers, the whole piece, that whole how Ecom fits within the business and delivers against business objectives, budgeting, you name it. Whereas a Shopify and Ecom product manager, whether it's Ecommerce or Shopify, Adobe, whatever stack you're on, is more in this tech space, and therefore that product knowledge, the technology knowledge, the AI capability knowledge within platform or within other tools, and understands things like the product data model, which impacts the AI discovery piece. They understand like checkout logics, app ecosystems, the discount capabilities, the automation and flows and build that you can build out of it, and run roadmaps. That to me is the role that's going to grow, because that person can then execute on and use the tools more effectively.
I think, we've already seen that, to be honest. And I think there's people that are in those roles that can build landing pages, they can draw, they just essentially everything we've talked about. They're just very hands-on and scrappy and able to do what would have taken days and require multiple third parties and people in minutes. And I think I completely agree. And the value of those people is getting so high as well. I completely agree.
Yeah, amusingly, I have a client I've just helped. I gave a bit of advice on recruiting a new Ecom manager, and they're on Magento. They've undernerd about moving away from an open source to like modern SaaS, look at Shopify, BigCommerce, but they just don't have the revenue to justify the re-platform it. Yeah. And they were looking at new Ecom managers, and none of them had any Magento experience. And my big flag to them was, you need someone with Magento experience, because you've got a one-person team and you want them to be hands-on. They're not going to know how to use Magento. They're not going to understand category management. They're not going to understand the limitations. They're not going to understand how it works day to day. So I think, I personally think this is exactly the right way to be going. Because you're right, I like the way you've used Scrappy a lot over the years, but I like that because I've got one of my main clients, they just brought on a new Shopify project manager, and she's really structured, really smart, but she has that Scrappy element where she can just get shit done and go, right, well, I know I can do this, or I could use a flow for that, or actually I could just create a meta field and do this, and that will now drive that. And if you don't have the ecosystem centric, or even, this app will do this best and it's cheaper than those ones. If you don't have that knowledge, decision making takes longer, and you can also spend money really poorly.
Yeah.
Right. So let's wrap this up in summary, because you're right, we could ramble on for hours. So I've got a couple of key points. What will be yours? And my summary is that AI and agentic commerce are reshaping discoverability, not just product, but your brand as well. So some focus is shifting from traditional channels, not all, to machine readable data. E-commerce teams need to restructure and are, in terms of core structures, the roles and the skills they need to stay in touch with evolutions in shopper behavior and tech. And the demand for hybrid AI literate talent is rising. Those are my core takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I don't think I'd really add anything. I think you covered everything there. I think, just the more time you can invest in learning this stuff. I mean, I've seen some pretty successful tech companies recently that don't have any developers, and it's just no code. And one of my friends has built something pretty smart in the Shopify world, again, without developers. And I mean, the stuff that I'm seeing some of the newer tools design as well, it's just crazy. And I think the more time you can invest in it, the more you'll be able to achieve. And
okay, there we go. That is our unstructured ramblings on the topic of how current ecom tech trends are influencing ecom strategy and team structures. Feel free to disagree with us. Feel free to point out glaring gaps in what we've talked about. Do reach out, do add comments to the post we put out on LinkedIn. But thanks as always for listening. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.